2018 Buildings and Grounds Committee, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks everybody for coming. I have two short elements that I'm going to go through. Everybody knows we've invited the 360 group here. First of all, real quick update, and I mean quick, on the capital project tracker that everybody has seen. Bob, the yellows are completed?
Yellows are complete.
Okay, just FYI, the roof has been replaced, the air conditioning in all of the areas have been replaced, the switchgear and distribution work has all been completed, the HVAC rooftop units at Ramsey have been taken care of, all of the retro commissioning has been done. The interior lighting has been completed at 4 elementary schools, and I believe they're moving into the high school this week. They'll be in the high school for a bit. Obviously, that's the largest or the highest number of lights we have to install. And just keep in mind, we have about 7,000 lights that we are installing. The envelope work has been completed. The architectural contract work has been completed. That was the stuff that we used on the roof, etc. The exterior lighting has been completed. Everybody knows that. There was no staff, or no particular staff support needed. The HVAC controls, they're still making some adjustments, or is that?
Some adjustments and continuing with a few of the smaller buildings.
Right. The water conservation, that's the plumbing. Scotty and I actually were out at a couple of schools. How many are done now? 2?
2.5.
Okay, so everybody knows we're replacing urinals, we're replacing toilets. We are replacing the hardware associated with those items, and what we're doing is we're putting flow restrictors on them so that it reduces our water consumption. Once they move into the high school, they'll be there for a bit because of the amount of work that's needed to be done. Anybody have questions on we continue to think we're going to be about $500,000 under the $2,819,000 that was originally budgeted. Any questions?
No, that was my question.
Okay, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the Building and Grounds Committee, and we've talked a bit about this as well, for the 2018-2019 season. We're talking about the facades at Ramsey, Evergreen, and UP, and we're also talking about a new entrance at the high school. Right now, a lot of people use the entrance where the Dipsy dumpsters are, and it's pretty unsightly, and so they've come up with a sketch of how to access that from that area. And once we have drawings on it and more information, we're going to bring it to everyone. We expect that to cost around $200,000. We've let those contracts, as everybody knows, meaning the architectural contracts for that. We're going to be replacing exterior doors. We're going to be upgrading the hardware on a number of doors. These items are relatively minor, about $70,000 in total cost. One major item that is on for consideration will be continuing to work on the high school roof. We've done how much so far, Bob? A third of it, or?
At the high school, approximately a third.
And we're going to do another third?
Yes.
Just in a series of stepping up and making sure that we replace the roofs in an orderly fashion so that we don't, end up with leaks, so on and so forth. That'll have to go out to bid. And I want to mention the architect issue on that too. We estimate that at about $442,000. High school stage lighting, we've had some concerns raised to that, and I'm thinking that's original lighting, is it?
That I'm not 100%
Bill, do you think it's
sure.
original?
Bill would know.
From the renovation, yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's, how old?
Oh gosh, that would have been probably 4 or 5.
4 or 5, so 12 years. Okay, 14 years, yeah. So we're going to be looking to go in there, replace it, we estimate about $50,000. We have 2 other items, and that's a stadium wall. The stadium wall we talked about at length. We have said to the engineers, go out and give us a bid on an alternative to replacing the wall, but we're still going to go with an estimate of $750,000. They have to do some preliminary testing on the existing wall in order to determine whether they can build a wall in front of it. Am I saying that correctly?
In front of the middle third.
I thought they were going to bid the whole thing.
Well, the 2 ends need fixed.
Okay, okay. So the whole thought continues to be that we, you know, if we're gonna spend a lot of money on the 2 ends, which need to be taken care of, why don't we look at the cost of doing the whole structure? We're not gonna change that structure, we're gonna use the athletic field for quite a long period of time. So we'll just wait and see what the bid comes back to be. And did we let the engineering bid, so they do the digging and the testing?
We approved the phase 2.
Phase 2, okay, so we approved that last
Yeah.
voting session. We are going to, I think that George and Bob have already done a preliminary plan for the exterior lighting that we've talked about. A good deal, that is, they're gonna go in and they're gonna look at the dark spots. They're gonna come back now and then tell us how many additional heads, how many additional lamp poles might be needed. We're taking the high side of this, which I think is about 40 or 80,000, 40,000 a pop, 20,000 a pop?
No, well, no, we have 20 locations roughly, so a little under $8 grand a piece.
Okay, so some of them might come in lower than that.
Right.
For example, we may not need a pole, okay? Just attach it to a building and go from there.
The locations, are they spread out, or? are they-
Yes, they're all throughout the district. We have a list of them. George and I actually drove around one night and pinpointed, I believe the number came to 20 different locations that we thought we could use some additional lighting.
That should pretty much take care of exterior lighting. And if you recall, our own electricians can put up the heads. I don't know if they can put the poles up or not.
It's gonna vary.
Okay. So we have that in the capital budget, which has not yet been approved. Then we have the sports complex marquee and the basketball scoreboard. They're both budgeted, one at $150,000, the other at $100,000. However, I'm told that we should, with some reason, expect that those costs will be offset by
Donators.
yeah, advertising, which is pretty typical of these kinds of activities. And then the last item we have is the Dectron system. Now, the Dectron system is a system in the pool that both heats and dehumidifies. Right now, we've repaired it and it's running well. The Building and Grounds Committee will meet and discuss all of these items further. There was some creative thinking, I think George, or I don't know who came up with the idea of maybe going in and replacing the guts as opposed to replacing the shell, which, now this is a unit bigger than this room, okay? Yeah?
Pretty close.
Okay, and in order to swap that unit out completely, we have to take a wall out. So Bob is looking into what the guts cost, because if the exterior unit's good, it's good. It's inside, it's not rusting away.
Just rebuild it.
Just rebuild
The
it.
ductwork's all good, everything?
Yep, ductwork's all good. So, but we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna come back to the board in a month or so and say, hey, these are our priorities. We wanna do it all. We wanna do some of it. The current estimate is about $2.646 million. And as we move forward, we'll talk to people. So any comments or additions or anything that you'd like the committee to consider? Paving anybody's driveway? No? Okay. John, your driveway's okay? Oh, automobile, okay. All right, well, then, with that, those two items are done. And I say this regularly, and I mean it. You know, George and Valerie meet all the time with us on a whole series of items. Scotty has joined the team, has not yet come to a meeting, although he's been invited, what, 8, 9 times, I think, something of that sort. So maybe Scotty will show up soon. Okay, we have several new board members, and we wanted to bring the 360 group in, which is the group that we contracted with, have signed a contract with, to represent us in the sale of the property across Route 22. And with that, Art McCauley
Can you just pause that for about 5 minutes, because I think Rick McIntyre is trying to call us, and he really wanted to hear this. So let me just see if he's close
Yeah,
before you
sure.
start. Okay, ask him.
I don't know, do we want to sing him? No? Okay. Huh?
Whose birthday is it?
Arts?
This is your birthday, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Many more.
Happy birthday.
Okay, just in lieu of him getting started, Rick, I want to give Bill, and I think I shared this with
Put it on
Steve,
speaker and set
a
it in front
copy.
of
Maybe
Jim.
put it on the podium.
All right, Rick's gonna join via phone.
Sure.
He's stuck in traffic.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, I'm still talking there.
You're talking.
Okay,
That's
I have
Bruce.
2 copies of the title search. I want to make sure Bill has both copies. And I have a copy of the survey. So now, as we go, you'll have a complete set. And in the event we get somebody that's interested, any prospective buyer is going to want to see that title search and surely see the survey.
Well, I think we're going to be meeting with the group here the end of this week or beginning of next week, and they wanted a copy of
I would think so.
both. And so, do we have Rick online?
Yeah, he's on the phone there.
Yes.
Put it on
Rick,
the
can you
phone.
hear us?
He's just,
He's here.
Oh, okay. Rick, that's okay. Rick, we just completed the first 2 elements. Now we're introducing Art McCauley and the 360 group to give us a little bit of a background of the 360 group and then an update as to the activity that's been undertaken. And it's also Art's birthday.
All right. This is what I want to do, come out and speak here on my birthday, so no problem. That's great. So am I on a mic here, or?
You are being recorded, yes.
Okay, so, first of all, I'll introduce, part of the key members of our team. So Hunter Morris, who's a director for RE360, director of the commercial real estate efforts, and, has a background with a Big Four accounting firm, a bank experience, and has been with 360 for 2 years now, I think. And very involved as a partner in the organization. So Hunter is a great expert and provides a lot of expertise on the financial side. Is it his birthday too? No, that's not yet. Valentine's Day.
It's interesting that you raised that because they're both the same age.
Right.
They both look very young.
There you go. That's a beard.
It's-
Right. Jose Raimondo, Jose and I worked together for about 6 years in another firm. Had a lot of experience in acquisitions and financing of commercial real estate properties. And I'll give you a list of some of the activities we've completed over the years. Jose's an extremely talented financial analyst, MBA from Notre Dame, and has been engaged with transactions throughout western Pennsylvania and as far west as Minneapolis. So he's a tremendous asset in the analytical side, and we'll get into that a little bit more if you'd like. So it's great to be here. I really appreciate that. We appreciate the opportunity. I think school board members are probably it's probably one of the most thankless jobs in the country. So I really appreciate it as a resident. And my wife's first teaching career was here at Gateway, South Junior High. So we go back a little ways here with Gateway. So RE360, people were asking who we are and why we're here. So RE360 is a group that's been around, the organization's been around about 10 years, has experience in
Western Pennsylvania with acquisitions and sales of property. And what we've done is put together a team of professionals that have tremendous experience.
Tell him to put his mic
Oh,
on
yeah, right.
mute.
Hey, could you put your mic on mute, please? Or, hello?
Rick?
Can you hear us, Rick? Yeah. Could you put your mic on mute?
Walk outside.
All right, okay, all right. So our firm is comprised of people that have experience from various backgrounds, and we thought our experience would give us an expertise at a level to deal with people on the commercial side that you don't get with some of the larger institutions throughout the Pittsburgh area. I work for a big firm, as Jose did. You're not paying for somebody that has 20,000 square feet in the USX Tower. A lot of overhead, a lot of expense, and as a result, a lot of the activities are delegated to junior people because the senior people are out trying to get more business, constantly getting more business. Our approach is to take a number of transactions and focus on those and be selective about who we deal with and where we work. So the opportunity arose to talk with the school board, and we thought looking at the opportunity was something we had strengths in, because it's a very analytical process. This just isn't posting a sign and selling a piece of property. Getting into a development like this is require analyzing the ability of a person to close, financing, what are the financial markets out there, capital markets, interest rates. These all impact someone's decision and ability to close on a property. So someone could come in with a great and glorious approach about what they want to do. On a development side like this, we're probably going to say we need 120 days to do our environmental work, another in part of that, check the title, do the survey, which we'll have, and then after that, they want extensions for development to test their plan, take it to the municipality, get that approved. Currently, I'm working with a group right now. It's going to be about 12 months before, from the time they say they want to purchase the property to when they want to close. And sometimes you charge for that, you make them pay for that ability to drag it out over a period of time. There's a payment for that as an option. But these are things that we want to analyze, because you don't want to get to the point where someone makes an offer, they're about halfway down, and they can't close. And the other offers, the other potential buyers have gone off in the other direction. So that's our analytical strengths. That's why we think we can provide, as senior people, expertise in helping make that best decision. What the property is worth right now, we haven't come up with an answer. Probably the market's going to dictate that. We suggested, and I understand the school board's hired an appraiser to do that. And the recommendation for that was a couple reasons. One is you're a public entity, you should probably have that in your file. Have that appraisal in your file. And that's not to say that's the price, that's not to say what it'll sell for. Hopefully it sells for a lot more, but we thought that would be a good benchmark for our own purposes. It's not going to be shared with a prospective buyer, but for our own purposes to know what kind of we're dealing with, and also look at competitive valuations throughout the area. You have situations where the UPMC East here, that was a property that, on an appraisal basis, probably came in extremely below what it sold for. But you find the right buy, the right time, it sells for a whole lot more. So our approach is to do a thorough analytical process of potential buyers, and that's where we are right now. Waiting for that appraisal to kind of give us a benchmark to start with. The other thing is big commercial firms, you are familiar with them, a lot of them have initials now in the Pittsburgh area. These firms have technology. Technology field's basically been level. I mean, technology's changed today, so we have access to the same technology any major firm has. So there's systems that are out there. We subscribe and pay for those systems. So we have access to reach out to people throughout the country and basically all over the world, and presenting the property, putting it in a format that we think will best give the opportunity to sell the property. We also have on our staff a tremendous marketing person. I'll give you a package of our organization. We're going to fly a drone once the snow goes off the ground. We'll do a drone of aerial of the property, put that in our package, and when someone logs into the site, they can look at that, it flies, it'll give a tremendous view of the property, the location in relation to other properties, so, you know, that, I think, would sell itself. We actually have a property nearby we've done that on, that's,
200 James Place.
it's a medical office building here, so if you go on our site, you look at that, there's a aerial of the property, to give you a sense of what we can do. So, any, before I get too much further, any questions at this point, or?
One question that I might ask, might have come up with the new board members. So you represent us, but that doesn't mean that another firm can't bring an offer
Right.
to you.
And that's one of the points I was gonna make. So, what we did was, we made a proposal, and our proposal was, as a consultant, we entered into an agreement to consult on this property, because there's a lot of issues that are gonna take place. There's municipality approvals, there's gonna be neighborhood comments, there's gonna be someone coming in asking, what about this, what about that? You don't have time to do that, so that's something that we did as a proposal, which we think is very competitive, and will allow us to represent you, to put the best face on the property, and minimize, probably scuttlebutt that's going on that's may not be accurate. So we'll be the face of the organization, of the property, and talk to the community, and also evaluate potential issues that may arise. As I mentioned, there's issues from zoning to design approvals. It's, all those things require time and energy. That's what we're all about. We'll do that. In addition to that, we agreed to sell the property for a 1% fee. So at the end of the day, when this property is sold, our fee or commission would be 1%. I think if you look at what's out there in the marketplace, you're gonna find it's extremely competitive. If you were to go to a large firm in the city with a national organization, they have to contribute some of their overhead and profit to the national firms, they're probably gonna be at 4%. So, you know, we think with our consulting fee and the 1%, we're probably at the most 2% of us overall sale versus what we know would be at least 4%. And often land sells for more than that. So Steve made a good point. We're not prohibiting another firm from coming in and making an offer. If these firms are that good, they may have a buyer in their pocket, someone they work with, that they can bring in, make an offer, and what we're suggesting is that buyer pays that broker to represent them. So our position is to save the school board money, save the municipality money, and the residents' money. That buyer is gonna pay the representative if they bring another representative in. And we can stick to our guns on that, and it's kind of an accepted practice, but you have to stick to your guns, and we'll do that. So that's the other part of it. The other side is with these a national firm coming in. We have the abilities to cut anybody, and we do. I mean, Jose's worked with developers all over the country, and you're currently looking at something like New Mexico right now with the development group. So, you know, this is something that we feel as an organization, we have the flexibility, and you know, we're not so big that we're going to be laborious in our process. Any comments?
No, I think the one thing that we stand out compared to most other firms is our backgrounds in that. So we own and manage over 400 properties that we own ourselves. And because of that, what that does is we understand what it's like to be an owner. As opposed to typical sales agents, they understand how to open a door or walk somebody through a site, but they don't know the particulars of what it's like to own a site and how you manage the site. I think that actually really, in a lot of cases, differentiates us. When we come in, we understand from the development side how to do it. We've done it before. So in this case, we understand how to do ground-up development. So with that, what that does is instead of we can come and give people ideas on what this site can be used for. So someone may come in and say, oh, this can only be used for an industrial development site. Well, we can give them other areas from which you can derive certain revenue sources. So instead of having one revenue source come through, we provide them different opportunities to look at it. So I think that really differentiates us from most other firms in our backgrounds. So that because of that, most landlords appreciate the hustle that comes with us because we understand the time value of money. And we understand that when a product's out there, you have to hit the market hard, and timing is of the essence, especially on a site like this where it could be 365-day due diligence period. So I think that background of ours really differentiates us from most other firms, and just our knowledge of what real estate really is. Yes?
I have a couple questions that I hope you would address tonight. How about if I just give you them and then you can,
Sure.
you mentioned about a year turnaround time, but that's from when you find a buyer. From your experience, my first question would be, how long would you guess it would take to sell a property like this? Number two, how do you actually sell this property for us? How are you finding buyers for this property? What is your, you're not just waiting for people to come to you when we put the for sale sign out.
Right,
How are
right.
you getting us buyers? And the last one is, can you tell us what other comparable properties of this size and this amount of money that you have sold in the past, 1 to 3 years?
Sure. So, first question I think was the time and how long it would take. Part of it is, you have existing school right now currently occupied. So, we need to probably have a better sense of what your timing might be as to the availability of the site. So I know that's a big question, and you don't have the answer right now, but as we get into the process, I think we need to have an idea of when it would be available, because that's going to determine someone's level of interest. So if you can say it's available, obviously it's not going to be ready in a year, but you say it's ready in 2 years, that makes it a little more attractive perhaps than somebody, if you would say, hey, it's 4 years from now, it'll be ready. So, that's an issue. To sell the property, I would say, find a willing and able buyer. I would say within a year, within 12 months. And I would say probably I'm going to start that probably within a couple months. Once we have appraisal, a survey, so that's about a year's time. And again, some of that will be impacted by how long it would be before they can get on the property.
I want to add 2 things that might be helpful. First of all, Bob, tomorrow at 3:30 will be with the surveyor at the junior high. Okay? That schedule's been set. Sorry, it looks like I didn't tell you. Okay? And the district and 360 group has already been contacted by 3 potential buyers and has been either eliminating them or working with them, and one of them is scheduled, as I mentioned earlier, to meet with the whole board, which I think is the best way to do this, as potential buyers, credible buyers, as he said, come through. So I don't think it should necessarily go just to buildings and ground. I think it ought to be to everybody, so.
I just want to say, Stephen, Valerie, and George, and myself, and Bill have met with the 360 group, I think, 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah.
And the questions that you posed, Mary Beth, were posed to them as early as, I think, last April, May. And
That's
we-
good,
we-
but I still want answers to
I know.
them.
Oh, I know you do.
And so does the community, and so does people sitting in the audience, and so does the Post-Gazette.
Yeah,
And so
I-
does the new board members, so
Oh,
I'm not trying to be
absolutely.
redundant, I'm just trying to be transparent.
Right, and here, in an effort to be a little more transparent, here's a copy of the contract that we have, and it was dated April with the 360, so that you all have the same document that everybody else is looking at.
Now, in addition to that, well, Art's handling some stuff out. If the board remembers, we asked Bob Brown to undertake a identification of the chattels, Mary Beth. We're undertaking the development of a list of the chattels which we would want to exclude from any sale, and he's already completed that. It's actually turned up some things that were interesting. We don't have to go into the detail here, but that's been completed and it'll be ready for us to give the 360 group once the board approves the list of items that we want to keep.
Can I ask a question real quick? I know I've been working with, whoever wants to. Steve says there's 3 potential parties that are interested. Now, how did they find you? How did they know? And I know being in a business, so if anybody has any questions, how they came about.
Right, see, one came quite candidly just because of the press about the
Right.
school being sold, for sale. So that was one. One was through just a network conversation I had with a party in the business, and the conversation led to that. And another was, I guess, saw that we had the listing and they gave us a call. So, and that, it's indicative of first time people call just to see what's out there and what your plans are, and they're asking questions about that. They'd like to get a copy of the survey. We're not talking about price, it's just trying to see if these people are for real and what their level of interest in. And so that's part of the vetting process that's taking place.
That's a good lead into the second question, which was how do you find?
How do you
How
find
do you
people?
proactively find buyers
Oh.
for us?
Good. There's a, Hunter, you have a pretty deep database of developers.
Yeah.
So, we have a database of developers, obviously, in western Pennsylvania and beyond. So it's something that we're going to send out information to them and on a repeated basis, kind of ping them, if you will, and let them know what's out there. Part of it too is, it's still a little bit of networking, so you're gonna talk to somebody that, has, isn't aware of it. Certainly it might be an organization, hospital, a nonprofit, et cetera, major corporation. You have to get that out there, let people know about it. So it's a process, it takes a matter of time, it doesn't happen overnight, but it is a process. And that's why I say to really find a buyer that's going to be able to make a significant offer, and I think you have to allow that 12 months in order to do that.
And the last question was about how many comparable properties
Yeah.
have you
So
sold?
if you go on the back, we have some, actually the last page are properties that I've been involved in the sale. And Jose just reminded me, I forgot to put on here, Jose. Within the last, over a year ago, the property in Sewickley is a kind of similar site, smaller but antiquated property, prime location, the heart of Sewickley, and we ended up selling that to a regional developer, and that took time. It took not as long as a year, but it did take time, and we held them to some pretty firm terms of getting in order to get it closed. Yes, sir.
Sir, you've been in business, you said around 10 years now?
Or the company has,
Okay.
much longer for me.
How's your assets? Are you in the black, red, as a corporation?
Hunter, why don't you answer that?
Yeah,
That's something we can't publicly.
Oh,
It's a private company, it's a private company.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. But it's pretty significant cash
Okay.
flow. Yeah.
Can you- What's the difference between Raimundo and Macaulay?
So, on the long list there,
it's on the page here, yeah,
so,
so
go ahead.
I can expand upon, so the summary of Raimundo transactions, which is the page before the last. I'll disclose this, so these were all purchases that I made with one of the firms that Art and I were associated with about a couple years ago. So I've always been on the, basically the buyer's side
of items. And what Art alluded to here, though, a lot of these deals were either listed by brokers or have been involved with financing, equity raising. But with the broker houses, we've done, a lot of these deals that were listed had direct involvement with a lot of the nationals that people are, potentially could have been as well in terms of services. So these are transactions that have been directly involved in regards to purchase.
So when he says that, what that means is he's analyzed the property from a financial perspective, negotiated purchase terms and financing terms, and in a very competitive world. So we're dealing with people like JP Morgan, major banks. This is an area that we feel that they bring to the table, a significant base to the table, and allows us to be better poised to handle potential buyers and evaluate their ability to close.
One other thing, to your question number 2, I believe that you asked in regards to how you source potential buyers. I mean, this would be an example of a potential source because purchase billings from, I'm going to disclose all the sellers here, but these were pretty national organizations that have done route development, this office, and a couple of retail centers here. So one of the deal sources would be the network that I established because I'm dealing directly with these folks. So we would basically transact. Yeah, you're introduced by the broker, but at the end of the day, it's seller-buyer transaction. So it's a screening process. It's your ability to ask the right questions that people say they'll ask, but they won't. Where you get your cash, where you get your money, what have you done before, have some references, et cetera, et cetera. Just, the time is of the essence, and if there's ways of making people commit, like non-refundable money from day one. I'm not saying that this will happen here, but there's certain things you can get around to make sure people close, not just kick the tires for them.
And when he says folks, it's not a couple of people, these are institutional players, so they may have portfolios of 50 properties, and that's his access to those types of owners and developers. So that's why we have them on the team.
One of the other things that might come up, I suspect it probably would not, but this is a good example, I think, of Jose and where his expertise comes in. A buyer might come forward and indicate that they want to securitize this purchase or this note. Well, that's, a whole other ballgame if they're going to get involved in securitization. And we need to know that and understand it, and we might accept an offer like that, we might not. So again, there's so much more to this than meets the eye, that it's important to have people who know these industries and know them well. Other questions?
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's right.
Brian, anything?
Not right now.
Okay. You heard most of it?
I did hear a good bit of it. Some of it broke up a little bit, and I apologize again for my tardiness and my general appearance. Some of us work differently than others. I had actually a series of questions for you guys. Just looking at the contract as I have over the last couple of days, the phrasing in the contract that strikes me is, as far as the retainer,
Yes.
it will begin on the date of this anticipated rezoning classification. And how did that end up actually working out for us? Because we haven't rezoned.
That's
So,
not, that was not.
where do we stand at this point
That's
as
not-
far as
Yeah.
your retainer? And
Yes.
are we currently paying you on a retainer?
Wait, let me stop for a second.
Yeah, sure.
That's really a board decision. We entered into the contract, we had an anticipated date. They've already worked for us for months and months and months. When we got to the anticipated date and Bill presented to the municipality, first to the planning commission, which approved it, and then to the municipality, which did not approve it, that was the anticipated rezoning date.
Okay, and that was when?
I don't know, when was that, Bill? 2 months, 3 months ago?
November, I believe.
Yeah.
All right,
So
so
November something.
are we currently paying a retainer now?
we just submitted our first.
Right.
Okay.
Payment.
In relation to that, is that kind of I'm a welder, you know what I mean? And I think most of the folks in, you know, the public here, not that familiar with these kind of contracts. I'm just curious, is that kind of a standard operating procedure to have, you know, for the contract to be held as a retainer? Is that something, you know, when you look at the number of contracts you have, is that something that's prevalent, or is that something that's kind of a different sort of case?
It's a little different because of the nature of the situation here, because it's a significant property, has a lot of potential in terms of uses, and yet it's not readily available. And so there's going to be a lot of communication, analysis to determine, you know, who's going to be a capable buyer, you know, when it gets most effectively marketed. And so, you know, our thoughts were to be fair to the school board, this is a way to get us engaged, not at a ridiculous fee. And, you know, as I said before, I don't know if you heard me, but, you know, it's probably, all in, it's right about 50% of what you would see if you went with a traditional listing brokerage. And, you know, and probably you're not gonna get that much, you know, if you did that, and you tell them, hey, I can't tell you when this property's gonna be available, they're gonna wait.
Correct me, Bruce, if I'm wrong, I don't think this is a retainer. I think this is a contract for services, and the services that he's listed
Yeah, we're-
going forward.
We're working.
Right. And they've been working for...
Since April.
Since April, well, before April, actually.
Oh.
Yeah,
All right.
So we did a
right.
analysis before, we presented something on
Okay.
the zoning issues. So, you know, we've been involved.
Okay. Again, I have several questions. Again, because I'm
He's one of the 3 new...
I'm one of the brand new board members.
Right.
I was at the meeting
Welcome.
actually when the vote happened for 360 and everything. I just have a lot of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I'm not worried about but wonder about is this is a fairly large scale deal. You know what I mean? We're talking about between the sale, the demolish, and the rebuild and whatever. It's, you know, I would imagine closing on close to $100 million. You know,
Well, I mean, you're kind of the new.
accounting for the new build, I mean, everything that's going on here, this is a massive deal. And just as board members, this is like legacy type stuff. You know what I mean? This is a major move. You know, this will be something that defines us possibly as a board. And I think the size of it requires me to ask you, like, real estate wise and money wise, do you folks have experience with this size of a deal?
Well-
And how much experience do you have relative to the other properties that you've dealt with? Where do we fall? I imagine we're on the higher end.
Well, I think you have to compartmentalize this. So we're really, if you will, we're involved in the sale of the land,
Mhm.
the building. You know, we're not involved in new construction, we're not involved in a new building. So our piece of this activity is really specific to selling that 26 acres. So it's not a $100 million transaction as far as we're involved in, it's selling those 26 acres. So in terms of the other parts of that, that's falls on the school board, that falls on your architect, your contractor, that we're not involved in. We're not part of that. So you know, if you tell us you want to sell this piece of property, that's what we're doing. And if you build a new school or consolidate and put them in an existing school, that's fine.
I'm not even talking about what we do on our end and on the district wide. I mean, just on that site alone.
Okay, on that side alone.
Because whoever's looking to buy it is, I would imagine, they're not gonna be using the building as is. They're gonna be
Right.
demolishing it, rebuilding something new. And I think all of that kind of comes into play in terms of the initial deal. So it turns into a bigger dollar amount than just the X number of dollars for the initial sale.
Can I just ask a question? Rick, are you talking about, okay, what Art, correct me if I'm wrong, we're worrying about selling the 26 acres, and once that goes, the building, whatever, is separate. We're not dealing with, we're not.
We're not, but the
Yeah, it's
folks
gonna
that
be
they're
the
gonna be
buyer.
dealing with will be.
It'll be them, so that keeps us out of it. Am I correct? It keeps,
Yeah, you're not,
We're
not
understand the
involved
buyer,
with
the
that.
buyer's gonna decide what he wants to
Right.
do with the
I
land.
think Rick's asking about what I was asking about this page
Yeah.
here. What other comparable properties have you sold? So there's no dates on here, but, 10 million, 700, 38 million, 29 million, 14 million, 14 million, 36 million. I would think all of those are pretty comparable, if not larger than our property. 26 million, 7 million, 15 million, 16 million. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
How many properties do you do the size of Gateway Middle School?
So that, okay.
Well, that,
Yeah, let me add one
I
other.
mean, that's sort of what we've done. And-
Right.
And that's part of this, the analytical side of it, because someone's gonna say, we wanna buy this property, and we're gonna put up a office building, 100,000 square foot office building. That's great. Can you do that, and can you close? Part of that is our ability to analyze their capability to purchase the property. They're gonna have to go to this municipality in Monroeville and get approvals, et cetera, and that's gonna take some time. And so we wanna make sure that, when we're talking to them, this is something that we're comfortable with. So we go back to the school board and say, this is a reasonable offer. So the size of the deal is dollar and cents wise, it's really the sale of the 26 acres.
One thing I want to add to that question, it's a good question. In conversations with Jim White, he's the appraiser that we hired, and he'll be coming in tomorrow and meeting with Bob, and he'll be walking the building because he's going to offer us a value based on residential use, but he will also include the use of that facility. So we can't rule out, although I'm guessing what you said is right, but we can't rule out that a buyer might not, that a buyer would come in and say, I want the 26 acres and I want the building. That's their call. Okay?
He's gonna give us a commercial value.
He's going to give us a commercial value and a residential value, and I expect that'll be about 10 days after tomorrow will be available.
All right, next kind of series of questions I had just deals with the rezoning. Because obviously, we've met with some resistance from the municipality. And actually, just in making my notes here tonight, I was flipping through my notebook, and I had a note where the meeting that, who all was there? It was me, Jesse, Mr. Ritter, Mr. Short. We had a meeting with council, as prospective, rezoners. And I had a note in here that there was going to be representation from 360 at that rezoning. And then in reviewing the tape from the 418 board vote, Steve, when you presented this, it was something you mentioned was that this group was going to be helping us in rezoning issues. So I'll just maybe have you speak on what you're doing in effort to help us with the rezoning. Were you ever contacted about that meeting and where we stand as far as your stance on rezoning, why we're doing it, what you're doing to facilitate us in our issues we're having with the municipality and getting that done?
Let me, during the process of getting ready for that, we decided
Can you
that,
let them answer the question? I
he
asked
wasn't
them?
contacted, okay?
Okay.
So it's about whether he was there or not. That was our decision. It was decided that the board had to go and deal with that.
All right.
Okay?
And we weren't part of that discussion.
Well, I think,
Okay.
let me add to this too, and since you're kind of our consultant, since this has hit the public and we're getting lots of different feedback about the sale of the property, and some of the feedback is regarding the zoning, you have a handful of people that say you don't need to rezone it until you have a buyer, and you have a handful of people that say you do need to rezone it commercial before you put it on the market. So you are representing us. Can you just publicly state what your recommendation is as far as the property being residential or commercial, and why?
Okay?
Thank you.
We collectively discussed this, and we think it's in the best interest to have it zoned commercial, because there's more opportunity, as potential buyers, more uses that are possible. And also, if that prospective, a buyer comes in and they have to go and get it rezoned, say someone wants to put an office building in there, that's gonna add to that timeline to get it sold.
It's also gonna depress the value.
Right.
If they have to get it rezoned, they're gonna offer less money. Chances are, if this is gonna be developed commercially, a developer coming in here, these individuals that Steve's talking about now, probably will say to us, we will not buy the property. We'll give you an option for a period of time, for a few $1,000s, and see if we can get it rezoned. That's why the property's worth a lot more if we're able to stand up to the developer and say, hey, we've already got the property surveyed, we already have a title search done, and we've got it rezoned. That adds value on our side. And I'm gonna tell you, you can ask any real estate person in Monroeville, property that's zoned residential has one value. Property that's zoned commercial, C2, has a much higher value. And you can take that to the bank. I've done it for, this is 45 years now.
Okay, so just so Deanna gets this for her article, in confirmation, you said rezoning the property will increase the value, leaving it commercial will actually decrease the value. I mean, leaving it residential will decrease the value, and it will also, if we rezone it commercial, it will potentially accelerate the sale of the property, which is why you're recommending that we go ahead and ask the municipality to rezone it commercial. I tried to summarize
I don't
that.
think I saw that, but.
Well, you said that.
Yeah, what I know.
Our 2 points were value and turnaround time.
Yeah.
And so you know, this is one of the very few last pieces of property in Monroeville that size that would be able to be commercially developed. There aren't, think about it, we're pretty well developed out. And as such, that makes this property more valuable. Because it's like buying property along the ocean.
Right.
Once it's all gone, it starts to really go bad. It's tough to buy because it gets more valuable. That's the case here.
It'll enhance the value of the property.
And for me, as common sense, that's what I would view. But again, I know that this is really redundant to some of the people on the committee, and I apologize for being redundant to them. But the purpose of this meeting and me asking you these questions is to get that information out to the public because of the discussions that are happening now about the property.
Sure, and, you know, in our view, commercially zoned property is gonna have a greater tax base, so it's gonna be more tax revenue to the municipality. You have a commercially zoned piece of land, it's gonna sell for potentially more than residentially zoned, that's a higher transfer tax limit. It all goes to benefit the municipality. So to not have it zoned commercial, I think would be.
Is that okay with you, Paul Schott?
We get our piece out of all that.
We get the biggest piece.
Yes, we do.
There we go.
So you guys are aware of the current situation we have with our municipality, that they've denied us once the rezoning. What is your strategy in pushing forward with that?
We don't,
Nancy, put her on speaker.
It ain't her either. It's D. It's D.
Big D.
you know, in answer to your question, I think it's better handled by the school board with the municipality.
Okay.
I do. I don't think it's our role to get in there and advocate for the zoning change.
Okay, because the only reason I asked that is because in leading up to this meeting tonight, I was, again, reviewing the meeting where the vote was taken to hire you
Right.
folks. And it was presented as you were going to assist in rezoning issues.
We'll be happy to go. We'll be happy to go and we'll make the same argument that Bruce just made and we just made. And we were more than willing to go.
Okay,
So-
and maybe that might not be a question
Yeah.
for right now, but
Well, again, I.
somewhere the decision was made to not involve them in
I
that
would say
meeting.
this much, I mean, did you see the presentation we put on? I mean, did you watch it on the video? Bill did a great job.
Yeah.
I think he lays it
I'm
out.
not even speaking about on that meeting. I mean the one that we had where it was me with the current board.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Is that what you're talking about, intergovernmental?
It wasn't technically intergovernmental. It was,
It was an informational meeting.
yes,
An
It was us,
intergovernmental,
no, it was not an intergovernmental.
it wasn't
meeting. Stop
intergovernmental.
saying
It was
that.
us acting
Us
as
an
a-
applicant going
yeah.
to clarify questions that the council had regarding the rezoning.
It happened to be our
It's not an
intergovernmental
intergovernmental
committee, meeting with their intergovernmental committee. But to stay above board, it was not technically an intergovernmental committee meeting. That would have been public. This was in private because it was dealing with a specific issue as far as us being an applicant for a rezoning. Therefore, it didn't need to be public. That's the meeting that I'm referring to, where I was under the impression that there was gonna be somebody from 360 there dealing with the rezoning as promised with the proposal as it was made to the board on 4/18 when the vote was taken. So that might be something we can discuss at a later time. And obviously, it isn't anything on you folks, you weren't contacted.
17.
But that's a question I've had. I think somebody touched on it, but I didn't quite hear the answer, was how did your group become aware that our property was potentially going to be going up for sale? And I don't know how you
Sure.
folks came into the fold in the first place.
Sure. Mr. O'Donnell, who I've known from years back in terms of commercial real estate activity, had a question about the viability of selling the property, and was it better to sell it, do a land lease, you know, what the potential highest and best option was in terms of monetizing the property. It was a monetization question. And so we did an analysis of leasing it as a commercial piece of property. That probably didn't make sense, and it probably wasn't gonna produce the results that the school board wanted. And then we looked at comparable properties in the area in terms of selling, what the land values were, et cetera. We did a study on that, and made some recommendations, one of which is to go with a C1 commercial zoning classification. This was all pro bono. We did it with the opportunity and to just help the school board. And then we got down to what about what do we think the next step should be? So that's kind of where we ended up.
The last question, and this is when I wrote in late. I'm making a proposal on the next board meeting for an RFP. And I've heard you folks on the way in, you know, speaking about on the competitiveness of your proposal, which I have no reason to doubt. Okay, I'm not an expert in this field. Okay, I'm just one of 9 members that represent the communities. When the former board hired you folks, there was no bidding process going on. We didn't look at other competitors of yours. Okay, and that's not to say that you don't have the best possible offer. You very well may. I guess my question for you tonight is, if we did move forward and make a request for proposal from competitors in your field, do you feel pretty confident that your proposal will stand up and that will still hold against incoming competitors making proposals?
Sure.
So if we did make that proposal next week and it passed, it's nothing personal. I just think it's due diligence. And I think it's a matter of transparency for the taxpayers to know that we're looking at every possible option. And we're doing everything we can to make sure we have the right folks. And I certainly hope that at the end of the day that it is you folks, because you've already done work. And you've already kind of got a familiarity with what we have going on. I just personally think it would benefit us to go through the correct process, even if it is a day late.
I'd like to add something to that. Okay, when you say correct process, that's not accurate. Professional services don't have to be bid. However, when this was discussed at length, I think on several occasions in executive committee sessions, because it was a contractual issue, I made it clear, as did George and Valerie and Bill and whoever else, that if the board wanted to go with other outfits, that certainly was on the table. So that was made clear to everyone before we entered into a contract, and they didn't move in that direction. So,
Steve, I have to challenge you on that.
well,
I'm very impressed with the 360 group.
now,
That's good.
If your recollection's different, it's
My
different.
recollection is different, that we had 2 hours to approve this contract. We tried to table it, and you guys said no. So 2 hours does not constitute, in my recollection, discussing this in executive session.
Okay,
So
that's your
let's just all
recollection.
agree to disagree.
We have 4 people who recollected it differently, okay? So I understand we can remember things differently. But I just want it to be understood that this was the correct process. This is how we handle or can handle all kinds of professional services. We don't put a bid out for architects, where we are this time. We're not putting bids out for lawyers. We don't put bids out for engineers. We haven't put a bid out for, who are the other people, not engineers, not the architects, the, on the wall, environmental people, whatever. We can, if we want to, but we don't have to. Yes,
I got a question for you because you're the chair.
yeah.
Okay, and I see your point too. Said we did find somebody, this board wanted differently, right?
Mhm.
We're still responsible for their contract now, ain't we?
That's a legal issue, but
Are we responsible for their contract?
Well, I think the language is vague, and that's the best I can say. You know, there is an agreement, you know, there was an intention of a meeting of the minds, I'm sure. I think if you look at the paragraph that talks about the term, which is really paragraph 2. The term of this agreement, the term, will begin on the date of this anticipated rezoning classification. Now, there are those that could interpret that to say, it starts when you anticipate rezoning. There are others that could describe that as the word anticipated really describing the rezoning. So it's an adjective. And as such, it doesn't take place until the rezoning takes place. But all that being said, this isn't a dispute about, I don't think 360 wants to dispute this. I don't think any real estate broker wants to get into some sort of interpretation or lawsuit. If this board now wants to retract their position, I think that that's going to put you in a position where they may do that, but I would suggest they're probably going to come in and try to be competitive, like they said. I don't think anybody wants to buy into a lawsuit, so it's an issue, George.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question on that? With it not being rezoned yet, all right, we have meetings scheduled with the municipality, public and everything like that. The 360 being that open meeting that we're anticipating on the 27th. Should everything be put on hold if we're anticipating putting out for bid?
I don't think so. I think I would move forward because you got to get it rezoned anyway.
Right.
You didn't need to hire any real estate people to get it rezoned. Fact remains is to continue with that process. This is an ancillary issue. Let's face it, if we got it rezoned tomorrow, you're looking at least 2 years before you're going to be able to put this, to sell it. And there's enough time in this equation for everybody to settle out on these issues. I don't think so. I'd keep going.
So Rick, if I may ask, is your goal with this exercise to do anything and everything you could possibly do as a board member to be as transparent as possible for the citizens of Pitt County, Monroeville?
I don't think I could put it much better, John.
Okay, that's our goal here.
Yeah, and again, I think it's due diligence. It's to, again, I have no reason to question
Sure.
your ability, and you may very well be the best possible choice for this. But I think because of the size and the ramifications of this decision, it's a little bit heavier than hiring an architect of record, in my opinion. This is talking about selling and closing a school, reorganizing the entire district. You know what I mean? This is a massive deal for this board. And I realize they're not involved with the reorganization, but it's part of this whole process. And I think if we're not looking at every possible option, I think we're not properly representing the taxpayers.
Bruce, I just had or I guess maybe Scotty or other board members. So this is a public meeting, and So the terms, some of the terms and conditions have been put out on the table as a result of this. How does it then become a competitive bid?
That's a really good point.
All the other potential bidders know
What they're doing.
what they're, and by the way, our contract's public too.
Right.
All right, so it's a legitimate point.
All right, so there becomes a point of diminishing returns in an attempt to delay as long as possible, be ultra transparent with the return on investment of being nimble and decisive. That is, if we know we need to sell a building, then let's do our level best to do it quickly and get the maximum price out of it, and not delay. On the other hand, the longer we delay, the more transparent we can claim to be, but what's the return on investment on that claim? So that's what this board is trying to think through, that's all.
I think what Steve's touching on, and it's a valid point, it's something that was a concern of mine when I made, the proposal, is because you guys are already on the record with a contract. Anybody that's coming in for this RFP can look at what they've already bid. And it does put them in an unfavorable position in that upcoming bid. So I don't know how we, as a board, accommodate for that.
In the same way, and I think this is probably where Bruce is about to steer, if a potential buyer notices the turmoil that exists and how long this school board and the municipality invest in taking their time for the sale, they can reduce the amount that they would offer.
Exactly.
And
It's
we
not a
don't want
low
to
bid
do that.
decision, though. It's not, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter
it's
what
not
the
about who's
price
coming in
is.
with the lowest price.
It's more about
who makes the best
who is going to
presentation.
work the best with us to sell the property,
Yeah,
period.
it's actually not,
We could choose somebody that has a higher price, it doesn't matter.
that's correct.
You don't have to
It's
go with the
actually,
low
as
bidder.
Paul points out, not even a bid, it's just an RFP. Other questions?
Bruce, you had a thought, was that it?
I think to do the, so you know, do you know why the Sunshine Law set out exceptions to putting things in the public? They have 5 of them, and they wrote those in as exceptions for a really good reason. One of them is sale of real estate. They don't believe you should be discussing the sale of real estate in the public. It doesn't do anything for you. Transparency in the real world of private business is not a good thing, okay? Let's face it. And you're about to enter into a sale of property that's gonna be called by the courts a private sale. And you should do it the way any business would do it, and that's sitting in that back room and hammering these things out. And I'm gonna tell you, the real estate agent is the least of the issues, the least of the issues. The trick here is to get it rezoned, get as many people before you, many entities as you can, pick the best one, if it's a sale or if it's a rental, whatever it's gonna be, and get it done. And you don't do that in public because it just diminishes things. It starts this kind of thing that's been raised already. Now they're at a disadvantage. You don't do this in public. Bob, you wanna say
I think, Bruce, if I may,
Yeah.
when it comes to the actual sale, like if it ends up still being 360 or whatever ends up happening, when it comes to actual proposals and sales and things like that, that's where we will do that behind closed doors.
No,
As you-
well, wait, the
Well, I mean,
sale.
as far as making the decision.
The sale itself
The
has
whole
to be
reason that
public.
this meeting is
The only
public is
thing that's
because it had to
public
be.
is when you vote to say, I
That's right.
take the $2 million.
Right, so when
Right.
we're looking at different
Right.
deals,
Right.
that's where it's behind,
Right,
and it's not transparent, necessarily transparent in what you're speaking of. But in hiring a group to represent us through that process, that's taxpayer money paying for this group to do that. And I think that it's imperative that is
Well,
transparent.
that's
And
something.
that's open for discussion.
Bob, you wanted to say something?
wait, one,
I just wanna
yes,
say-
well, just before we go there, okay, any other questions from board members?
For these guys, no, I'm sorry, we're
Yeah.
gonna drag you on here all night.
No, but it might be, so, okay, so Bob?
Bruce is absolutely correct. You want to keep your real estate conversations, together. But one thing you do need to do is be transparent with the public. And the public, the residents are really not going to care much about the buildings unless you're talking about the elementary schools. But the one thing we are all concerned, everybody in this room, is the students. And that's the one thing that you haven't discussed. And that's the one thing, you know, the residents are voters for the municipality, they're voters for the school board. That's where you're gonna run into your resistance. And this, you know, when you close the Gateway Middle School, there are 600 kids there that are gonna be displaced. You need a plan for what those kids are gonna have, where they're gonna go, before you sell the school. And that's what these people are telling you.
That's all being worked on, Bob.
Yeah,
But you need that before you sell the school.
Bob.
We
that's-
already-
that's a good
We
point.
will have that before.
Wait,
You know,
that's already been and being worked out, so it's a good point.
There are 2 members on the school board that were there when when the Pitcairn property was sold, as well as myself. There's more to that than not. There's a school law that says there's a timeline associated with this.
Mhm.
It's
Every
significant.
school board member should also, and Bruce Dice knows that procedure. The other thing every school board member should know is not one penny of that sale is gonna go into education. Bruce knows that from the Pitcairn sale. So this is not bringing money in for educational
purpose of the
purposes.
sale
You're gonna
of-
have to build a new building, possibly.
Purpose of the sale is to build a new building where the 5-6 building is.
Right, but you need a plan and you need to discuss that with the public. If you try and put the kids up in the Gateway, in the high school, Woodland Hills has done that, and their school has been a disaster.
For the record, there's been no conversation about placing the kids up at the high school.
You know,
That's
this is the
rumors.
problem.
That's
You
the
have to
social media
discuss with the
rumors.
public, and you really need to do that.
And we're, as the gentleman said, we are 2 years away from possibly even completing. And when I say possibly, it's entirely up to the board at that time
Absolutely.
to do so.
But it's gonna take you 1 year to figure out a consolidation plan.
And we understand that, and also with the PDE regulations, this board, myself, everyone's very much aware of everything that goes into the possible closing of a building. We all sat through the Pitcairn experience, just like yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And we understand the headaches and the timelines and everything involved in that process. We do plan on having those open forum meetings, because when you reorganize a school district, it's the children that are affected first and foremost.
Right, and I'm just telling you that the public is, part of your rezoning problem is gonna be with that also, because when you rezone that commercial, you are very much restricted on what right now you can do anything you want with that. You could build a new school building, whatever. When you rezone it, you will not be able to do that. So the public is concerned with the rezoning for the very fact that it does affect the students. So, you know, I would say it's better to put that out in the public earlier than later.
Bob?
They just told you it needs a year to go through.
Those are good points, and I think as Mary Beth said and Bill said, there's been a tremendous amount of work already done on that, and that certainly will be done the way you're suggesting it. If there are no other questions for
I'll let them-
Art and Hunter and
It is
Jose,
Art's birthday.
this is Art's
Sorry.
birthday. Can we let them go?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for happy
Thank you for your
birthday.
time.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
We're willing to do that.
All right.
Thanks very much, guys.
All right.
Can I just address some of Mr. Elm's comments a
Oh,
little
sure,
bit?
sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
So,
Thanks.
I mean, the reconfiguration of some of the elementary schools went back to when Mr. Capel was on the board with you, and that's how long ago this started, before I was on the board, when he was on with
As
you.
a matter of fact, I sent all of you
Absolutely.
a copy of what was done in 2015. And it's basically had a lot of rejection there, and it was never,
It
I
was a
think-
lot of rejection from multiple scenarios of consolidating the elementary
that's
buildings.
just background for you, so you.
Public-
Can I publicly say that this board as a whole is in favor of keeping our elementary schools? That's why we are
Maintaining
investing
the 4 elementaries.
in updating them and making them more appealing and getting them new windows and new
I
heating and
just
new
heard
air
that, so,
conditioning.
you know, my comment was, you're not gonna get pushed back on saving your elementary schools.
Right.
You're not gonna get pushed back on getting rid of Gateway Middle School. You will get pushed back on what's gonna happen to those students that are displaced. That's where your problem is, and that's where you need to transparently communicate to the community, you know, that you have a plan for taking care of these students. That's what I'm saying. That's why I've been resistant to rezoning, because you need to communicate to the public where these students are gonna go before you before you make a commitment.
So can I mention two things about
Okay,
our,
so on that real quick,
Yeah.
Mr. Dice. If we rezone tomorrow, C2, and we don't sell for 25 years, can Gateway Middle School exist as is?
Yes, it can,
Yes.
and not only that, you could build a new school right on
Right,
that.
right on.
So C2 does not eliminate us from keeping it a
I
school?
would say you can't build a new school there
Yeah.
unless you go through the municipality and.
Oh, sure, you're gonna always have to go through the
All right,
municipality.
but again, the rezoning doesn't
It would be a
Doesn't do anything.
non-conforming
doesn't
use.
lock us into selling it, doesn't
Yes.
lock us into closing the building.
A new school board can come in 2 years from now and decide they don't want to sell.
Just want to maintain what we have.
Well, you can maintain it, but I don't think you can build a new
Okay,
building.
let me explain, just real quick. If it gets rezoned commercial, that building is now non-conforming.
Right.
Okay, now, the law is such that you can tear it down and build a new school in that same footprint, no bigger than that school. And then you could build another new school if you wanted to. You could apply to the municipality, ask to expand the non-conforming use, to permit a bigger school, and they could say yes or no to that. But if you keep it in the same footprint, you could do it because it's non-conforming.
Okay, as long as it's the same.
can I make one other
Does
point?
that kind of answer, calm a little bit of the fears in any way?
Okay. So one other point is, you know, we have watched two schools, districts neighboring ours, build a new school and now be in deep financial trouble. I don't want to say the names because I don't want to offend my colleagues. You probably all know who that is.
It's been in the paper.
And then we have another neighboring school that just put their taxpayers on the hook for 20 years to build a new school, okay? Gateway is very concerned about the financial integrity of this district, and we do not want to go take out that kind of a loan and put our taxpayers on the hook for 20 years for a new building and then not know what we're going to do in 2 years because the bank account is down to zero. So the background for this whole process is to accumulate funds to put toward a new building where the 5-6 building is because it's in desperate repair without putting the taxpayer on the hook for $50 million for the next 20 years. So the whole reason we're doing this is to maintain a fiscally stable school district and at the same time consolidate, not have waste, and have facilities that aren't falling apart and that are stable and desirable for people to continue to educate their kids and move to Monroeville.
And
That's the
an
bottom
excellent-
line.
That's an excellent plan.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting, when you get that plan to a certain point that you can present to the community, it is in your best interest to present
And
to the community.
Bob, and we will do that. Are there any other comments or questions from you, Bob? Because you're the whole audience. Yeah.
Congratulations.
No? Okay, anything else from no?
I
Yes.
got a question. With Gateway Middle, I understand it's an older building and these
Yes.
repairs. Is there documentation of how much repair is needed for that building to be in like working order?
We would have that in our ABM catalog, probably. the
If I'm not
specifics,
mistaken,
Bob.
we did an assessment like a year or two ago, and
Yes.
the amount of repair between Mosside and Gateway was astronomical.
Significant. We could probably get a detailed
I still have
list,
that.
yeah.
We've had that.
Either the ABM and.
I still have that.
Yeah, we've had that conversation numerous times within
But that doesn't put it outside the realm of possibility.
within the committee about that, and we've actually decided, as the board has decided, to stay away from doing anything other than repairing these two schools, okay? Because it's just throwing good money after bad. Any other questions? I'm pushing just because we have another
Yeah, we have another meeting.
negotiation session to go to. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Bruce. See you later.
Have fun tonight. That's what we want. We packed house up there.